Willow Creek, nestled deep in the undulating foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, was a town that prided itself on its sturdy practicality. Its main street, lined with brick storefronts and a no-nonsense general store, hummed with the quiet efficiency of a community focused on the tangible. A small manufacturing plant hummed on the outskirts, turning timber from the surrounding forests into lumber and paper products. The air, crisp with the scent of pine and sawdust, seemed to carry a subtle disdain for anything deemed old-fashioned or unscientific. Willow Creek was a place of measurable outcomes and concrete facts, where tradition often felt like an inconvenient obstacle to progress, a quaint but ultimately irrelevant relic. The pervasive sense of modern efficiency, almost a quiet smugness, meant that the whispers of ancient forests and hidden valleys often went unheard, dismissed as mere rustling leaves. On the forgotten fringes of this pragmatic town, tucked away amidst a tangled embrace of ancient, gnarled oak trees, stood a modest, cluttered cabin. This was the domain of Elias Thorne, a man in his late 70s, whose very existence seemed to defy Willow Creek's modern sensibilities. Elias was the town's resident eccentric, a figure of gentle amusement and quiet exasperation for most adults, but a source of endless fascination for the youngest generation, at least initially. He was known throughout Willow Creek for his fantastical tales of the sunken city of Eldoria, a grand, shimmering metropolis hidden beneath the earth, ruled by a wise and benevolent crystal king who communed with the very essence of the mountains. He recounted these narratives with a passionate conviction, his voice, though raspy with age, resonating with an unwavering belief in their truth. He would share these stories with anyone who would listen, primarily the children who, on sun-dappled afternoons, would gather at the base of a particularly ancient and majestic oak tree by the meandering creek. The children, their faces initially wide with wonder, would huddle close, their small hands clutching their knees, captivated by Elias's deep, resonant voice. He would paint vivid pictures of glittering crystal spires, of people who spoke to the wind and understood the language of stones, of guardian creatures carved from living rock. But their attention, as children's often is, was fleeting. Soon, the initial awe would give way to restless fidgeting, then suppressed giggles, and finally, outright mockery. "That's just a silly old man tale," a sharp-tongued girl named Brenda might declare, her voice echoing the dismissive tones of her parents. Another boy, Tommy, would mimic Elias's dramatic gestures, drawing snickers from his peers. They would call his stories fairy tales. Make-believe, laughing openly at the earnestness in his eyes. Parents, passing by on their way to or from the lumber mill, would offer Elias polite but distant nods, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. They would subtly, almost imperceptibly, pull their children away, their whispers carrying on the wind. "He's a bit fancy," or "Don't upset the old man, but his stories aren't real. Dear." The unspoken message was clear. Elias Thorne, with his fantastical narratives, was a charming relic at best, a harmless old fool at worst. He was a quaint piece of Willow Creek's fading past, utterly irrelevant to its modern, pragmatic future. The town council, a body comprised of stern, no-nonsense individuals, offered Elias a more formal, yet equally dismissive, rejection. He had, with a quiet but unwavering persistence, attempted to petition them multiple times over the years to preserve an overgrown, seemingly unremarkable patch of forest just beyond the town's official limits. He claimed it held ancient significance, a sacred ground tied to the stories of Eldoria. His requests were met with polite smiles and thinly veiled exasperation. "Mr. Thorne," Mayor Hemlock had stated at a recent meeting, his voice dripping with condescension, "we appreciate your vast passion for local folklore, but Willow Creek needs land for expansion, for practical development, not for ghost stories. The council finds no scientific merit to your claims. Request denied." The decision cemented Elias's image as an irrelevant relic, a living embodiment of the inconvenient past that Willow Creek was determined to leave behind. He was alone in his conviction. his voice unheard amidst the clamor of progress. Despite the relentless ridicule, the dismissive attitudes, and the creeping loneliness, Elias Thorne harbored a profound, unwavering kindness. He never turned a child away, no matter how boisterous or mocking. After each storytelling session, when the laughter had faded and the children had dispersed, leaving him alone at the base of the old oak, he would reach into a worn canvas bag. From it, he would produce small, perfectly crafted gifts, hand-carved wooden trinkets, smooth and polished, tiny birds or bears that fit perfectly into small palms, or small paper bags filled with homemade candied nuts, rich with cinnamon and molasses. He offered them indiscriminately, a quiet act of generosity that transcended their laughter. He never expected thanks, merely a fleeting moment of wonder in their eyes, a brief connection before they ran off. One blustery autumn afternoon, a frightened whimper led him to a small, scruffy terrier puppy, its leg caught in a snare left by a careless hunter. The puppy whimpered, its eyes wide with fear. Without hesitation, Elias knelt. His gnarled hands, usually so skilled at carving, worked gently, meticulously, to free the animal. He cradled it, murmuring soft words of comfort, before carefully carrying it back to his cabin, where he nursed it back to health, before finding it a loving home with a family who had been looking for a pet. On another occasion, he saw a young boy, Daniel, crying quietly behind the general store, his favorite wooden toy train shattered beyond repair. Elias, without a word, took the broken pieces, and with a small pot of glue and a few precise cuts of wood, mended the train, making it stronger than before. He presented it to Daniel with a soft smile, refusing the boy's offer of a few shiny coins. These were quiet acts, unseen by most, but they revealed a deep, hidden wellspring of compassion within Elias, an enduring connection to the innocence and fragility that the pragmatic town seemed to have forgotten. He was a quiet healer, a mender of broken things, both literal and metaphorical. Elias's stories, though dismissed as fairy tales, were laced with tantalizing, almost too specific details. He often spoke of elder runes, ancient symbols carved into whispering stones found deep within the forgotten, overgrown woods around Willow Creek. He claimed these runes were not mere decorations, but keys to Eldoria's hidden knowledge. He would describe the texture of the stones, the way the moss grew in precise patterns over the carvings, details that seemed too vivid for mere invention. He possessed an intricate, hand-drawn map, worn and faded with age, tucked securely within the pages of a beloved leather-bound book. He believed it depicted Eldoria, not as a mythical realm, but as a tangible place. Others, including the few scholars who had ever deigned to examine it, dismissed it as a child's fantasy, a charming but inaccurate rendering of local geography. Yet, Elias would trace its lines with a reverence that hinted at a deeper understanding. There was a faint, almost imperceptible scar on Elias's right wrist, a peculiar geometric pattern that seemed to mimic a symbol he sometimes drew on his map, a symbol he called the Heart of Eldoria. He never spoke of how he got it. More strikingly, Elias seemed to possess an uncanny, almost preternatural knowledge of the local wildlife's behavior. He could predict changes in the weather by the flight of a specific bird, understand the subtle shifts in the forest by the rustling of leaves that others dismissed as mere wind. He knew where the rare, almost luminous night-blooming orchids grew, places only mentioned in the oldest, forgotten local legends. He would whisper about the star moss that only bloomed under the alignment of certain constellations, always pointing towards a forgotten spring. It was almost as if he understood their ancient rhythms, their deep connection to the land itself, a connection dismissed by the modern town as mere folk wisdom. These small details, seemingly inconsequential, were the subtle seeds of mystery Elias carried, the quiet foundations upon which the extraordinary truth of his tales would one day be revealed. He was not just a storyteller, he was a living echo of a lost world, a whisper of Willow Creek's forgotten heart. The quiet, almost stagnant air of Willow Creek, accustomed to the rhythmic drone of the lumber mill and the rustle of Elias Thorne's fantastical tales, was abruptly disturbed by the arrival of a force as sharp and precise as a freshly cut diamond. Dr. Eris Thorne. She drove into town not in a dusty pickup truck, but in a sleek, utilitarian SUV, its clean lines and modern design a jarring counterpoint to the town's weathered charm. Eris, a brilliant and ambitious archaeologist in her early 30s, represented everything Willow Creek revered: science, logic, empirical evidence. She was a rising star in her field, her articles published in prestigious journals, her reputation built on meticulous research and undeniable facts. What the town didn't immediately grasp, however, was that she was Elias's granddaughter, a connection she rarely, if ever, acknowledged. Her arrival was driven by academic pursuit, not by any sentimental family loyalty. Eris was on a highly competitive, grant-funded expedition, her focus meticulously defined. Satellite imagery and preliminary geological surveys had revealed unusual crystalline deposits deep within the subterranean cave systems that lace the Appalachian foothills around Willow Creek. These were no ordinary quartz veins. Initial analyses suggested a unique molecular structure, perhaps even properties not fully understood. The scientific community, particularly those interested in crystallography and unusual geological phenomena, was intrigued. Eris, ever at the forefront of emerging discoveries, had secured the grant to lead a full-scale study, hoping to publish groundbreaking findings that would solidify her already impressive career. Her initial plan was to establish a research base, map the cave systems, and analyze the crystal formations, a purely scientific endeavor divorced from any local folklore. When the townsfolk, inevitably, learned of her connection to Elias, they braced themselves for a potentially awkward encounter. Eris, true to form, dismissed her grandfather and his stories with a polite but firm wave of her hand. "My grandfather is a wonderful storyteller," she would say to curious locals, her voice devoid of warmth. "But his sunken city is simply local folklore. My research is based on verifiable geological data." She saw his tales as senile ramblings, harmless but utterly irrelevant to her rigorous scientific pursuits. The thought that his fairy tales might hold any shred of scientific truth was an absurdity, a notion she instantly relegated to the realm of charming but utterly unscientific delusion. However, the very land of Willow Creek, with its ancient secrets, seemed to have other plans. As Eris and her small, highly specialized team began their detailed geological and geophysical surveys, a disquieting pattern began to emerge. Their advanced equipment, designed to detect minute seismic shifts and unusual energy signatures, started picking up anomalous readings. These weren't random spikes. They were precise, localized fluctuations, unusual energy signatures, subtle but distinct, radiating from deep within the Earth. And disturbingly, these anomalies were clustered in the exact locations where Elias's fantastical tales placed specific magical artifacts or crystal structures of the sunken city of Eldoria. Where Elias spoke of the Crystal King's vault, Eris's instruments detected a strong, resonant energy pulse. Where his stories described luminous spire foundations, her seismic readings showed perfectly circular, impossibly uniform echoes from beneath hundreds of feet of bedrock. Eris's initial reaction was classic scientific skepticism, a fortress built on empirical evidence. She reviewed the data, recalibrated her instruments, and reran the simulations, convinced there must be an error, a glitch, a logical explanation for these perplexing alignments. "It's a geological anomaly, a coincidence," she muttered to her lead assistant, Dr. Ben Carter, a quiet, brilliant geophysicist who shared her dedication to scientific rigor. "There has to be a rational explanation," but each reanalysis only confirmed the data's unsettling consistency. This forced her to confront an unsettling possibility that there was more to her grandfather's fairy tales than she had ever dared to imagine. Her carefully constructed academic reputation, her entire scientific worldview, was directly challenged by the very data she was collecting. She experienced profound cognitive dissonance, a frustrating internal battle between what her instruments were telling her and what her rational mind insisted was impossible. The whispers she had dismissed as folklore were now echoing in her scientific readouts. The frustration mounted. Eris, a woman accustomed to clear answers, found herself navigating a scientific twilight zone. She tried to debunk her grandfather's tales through rigorous investigation, poring over historical maps of the region, consulting local geological surveys from decades past, and even trying to find alternative explanations for the crystal deposits. But the more she investigated, the more the empirical data, stubbornly and inexplicably, aligned with the fantastic narratives Elias so passionately wove. The ancient lines on Elias's hand-drawn map, once dismissed as childish doodles, began to align with geographical features she was now mapping with high-precision GPS. The strange rock formations he called guardian stones corresponded with areas of unusually high mineral concentration. This struggle, this wrestling with the inexplicable, slowly began to awaken something deep within Eris, a curiosity that transcended her purely academic pursuits. She found herself, late at night in her temporary field office, poring over printouts of her seismic data, comparing them to the photocopied pages of Elias's old map, a secret she kept even from Dr. Carter, a deep-seated, almost forgotten family connection to the land and its stories, long buried under layers of scientific education and career ambition, began to stir. She remembered fragments of her own childhood, distant memories of Elias's stories, half-forgotten images of strange, glittering rocks he would sometimes bring her. The rational part of her brain screamed for an explanation, but a more primal, intuitive part, a part inherited from her grandfather, began to whisper of possibilities she had never considered. The point of no return came on a particularly cold, clear morning. Eris and Dr. Carter were exploring a newly discovered subterranean chamber, deep beneath the oldest part of the Willow Creek Forest, an area Elias had always referred to as the Sunken Heartwood. Their portable ground-penetrating radar had shown an unusual void, and careful excavation had led them to this untouched space. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and an inexplicable faint sweetness. As Eris carefully brushed away layers of millennia-old soil from a raised dais in the center of the chamber, her gloved fingers brushed against something impossibly smooth, perfectly cool. It was a small, exquisitely crafted object, no larger than her palm, perfectly faceted and seemingly carved from a single piece of unknown crystal. It was unlike any mineral she had ever encountered, its internal structure shimmering with an ethereal luminescence, a faint rhythmic pulse that resonated with the strange energy signatures her instruments had been detecting for weeks. It was precisely where Elias, in his most fantastic tales, claimed the Crystal King's Eye was located. Eris held it in her hand, the crystal pulsing faintly, almost imperceptibly, against her skin. Dr. Carter, usually so composed, stared at it, speechless. "Eris, what is this?" he whispered, his voice filled with scientific awe. The artifact emitted a faint, rhythmic pulse that was both visible as a subtle internal glow and audible as a low, almost subsonic hum. It was undeniably ancient, undeniably artificial, and undeniably emitting the same unique energy signature that had plagued her data. This discovery was irrefutable, undeniable proof that Elias's fairy tales had a basis, a foundation, in reality. The Crystal King's Eye was not a myth, it was a tangible, physical object. Her professional integrity, her entire scientific worldview, was now irrevocably linked to proving or disproving her grandfather's fantastic claims. She could no longer dismiss him, no longer ignore his stories. The comfortable world of scientific certainty she had built for herself had cracked, and through that fissure, the whispers of Eldoria now rushed in, demanding to be heard. Eris Thorne, the brilliant archaeologist, was now inextricably bound to the very magic she had always disdained. The crystal shard, cool and impossibly smooth in Eris's gloved palm, pulsed faintly. A silent heartbeat from a forgotten age. Its internal luminescence cast an ethereal glow on her face, illuminating the profound intellectual awe and equally profound cognitive dissonance warring within her. Dr. Ben Carter, usually a bastion of scientific composure, merely stared, his mouth slightly agape, the portable ground-penetrating radar machine forgotten at his feet. The silence in the subterranean chamber, broken only by the faint thrum of the crystal, felt heavy with the weight of shattered paradigms. Eris, for the first time in her illustrious career, felt truly unmoored. Every principle, every empirical truth she had built her world upon, was now being challenged by a single, inexplicable artifact. Her scientific mind, however, immediately sought a logical pathway through the chaos. There had to be an explanation. Perhaps it was a naturally occurring geode with unusual piezoelectric properties. Perhaps it was an elaborate hoax, though the thought of her gentle, eccentric grandfather being capable of such an intricate deception was absurd. No, this was real. The energy signatures, the seismic echoes, the satellite data, they all pointed to an undeniable systematic anomaly. And now, this. Her thoughts, usually a meticulous procession of theories and deductions, raced wildly. There was only one person who had ever spoken of such a thing, who had woven tales of a crystal king's eye with such uncanny detail. It was a humiliating admission, a journey she had consciously avoided for years. But there was no other path. She had to talk to Elias, reluctantly, yet with a driving scientific curiosity that transcended her personal discomfort. Eris made her way back to Elias's cluttered cabin. The familiar scent of old paper and wood smoke, once a reminder of everything she had sought to escape, now held a strange, almost magnetic pull. She found Elias seated by his hearth, meticulously polishing one of his small, hand-carved wooden birds. The air around him seemed to hum with an almost ancient peace, undisturbed by the scientific turmoil raging within her. "Grandfather," Eris began, her voice tight, formal, the crystal shard still clutched in her hand. She held it out to him, its faint glow seeming almost shy in the warm, flickering firelight. I found this in the sunken heartwood. You spoke of a crystal king's eye. Could this be it?" Her scientific training demanded a direct empirical question, a plea for a rational explanation. Elias looked up, his eyes, usually distant, now focused keenly on the shimmering artifact. A slow, knowing smile, gentle and profound, spread across his weathered face. He didn't ask where she found it, or how she knew of the location. He simply took the shard from her hand, his gnarled fingers brushing hers. The crystal, as if recognizing an old friend, seemed to pulse a little brighter, its faint hum growing almost imperceptibly louder. He didn't offer a scientific explanation. He didn't launch into a detailed geological analysis. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment, his thumb tracing the perfectly faceted surface of the crystal. Then, in a soft, resonant voice that seemed to draw the very wisdom from the ancient wood of his cabin, he began to recite, "From the heart of Eldoria, where light takes form, the eye of the king shall guide through the storm, a whisper of power, a song in the stone, to awaken the knowledge, long overgrown. It speaks to the listener, in silent accord, revealing the pathways, by ancients adored." As he spoke, he gently turned the crystal, and for the first time, Eris noticed subtle, almost invisible etchings on its surface, tiny, intricate symbols that looked precisely like the elder runes Elias often spoke of, the same ones from his faded map. Then, Elias began to hum, a low, resonant tune, barely audible, a deep vibration that seemed to emanate from within him. As the hum filled the small cabin, the crystal shard in his hand began to glow more intensely, pulsing with a steady, rhythmic brilliance. The runes on its surface shimmered, and then, impossibly, A faint holographic image flickered within the crystal's core, a complex, three-dimensional geometric pattern, twisting and shifting, resembling a miniature ethereal map of interconnected chambers and pathways. Ares, the brilliant archaeologist, was the sole witness to this controlled unveiling of Elias's true talent. Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't storytelling. This was a living, breathing connection to a forgotten technology, an innate understanding that transcended mere human knowledge. Elias was not just a storyteller. He was a living library, a keeper of ancient knowledge, perhaps even a conduit to Eldoria itself. Her scientific mind reeled, trying desperately to rationalize it, to find a scientific explanation for his uncanny knowledge, for the glowing crystal, for the holographic map. But she couldn't. The evidence was before her, defying all logic, all known scientific principles. It was an act of profound intellectual awe, mingled with an unsettling, almost terrifying, cognitive dissonance. The incident forced her to confront the limitations of her own empirical worldview and the undeniable possibility of ancient, inherited wisdom that operated on principles unknown to modern science. Meanwhile, miles away from Willow Creek, in the polished, sterile halls of academia, news of Dr. Aris Thorne's unusual findings, particularly the reports of anomalous energy signatures and the discovery of a unique crystal, reached the ears of Dr. Alistair Finch. Finch, Aris's former mentor, was a man whose academic brilliance was overshadowed only by his boundless ambition and a relentless hunger for recognition. He was a type A villain, charmingly manipulative, utterly ruthless, and deeply envious of any rising star that threatened his own preeminence. Initially, Finch dismissed Aris's preliminary findings as amateurish, fanciful, the predictable ramblings of a young archaeologist dabbling in unproven theories. He scoffed openly in department meetings, casting aspersions on her methodology and subtly implying she was susceptible to local superstitions. However, when he received a leaked copy of Aris's more detailed preliminary reports, complete with high-resolution satellite images of the energy signatures and the spectroscopic analysis of the crystal shard, his dismissive attitude vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating gleam in his eyes. He recognized the potential immediately. This wasn't just an anomaly. This was a potential goldmine, a discovery that could redefine archaeological history, launch a career into stratospheric heights, and garner untold fame and funding. And he wanted it. Finch immediately shifted from dismissive to predatory. He saw a chance not just to claim the lost kingdom of Eldoria for himself, but to utterly destroy Aris's burgeoning career in the process. He began his insidious campaign subtly. He used his extensive network and formidable reputation to manipulate the academic grant committee that oversaw Aris's funding. He quietly disseminated rumors, questioning Aris's scientific rigor, suggesting she was becoming unprofessional and being unduly influenced by local folklore, implying a loss of objectivity. He subtly planted seeds of doubt about her mental stability, all designed to make the committee question her ability to lead such a sensitive, high-profile excavation. More overtly, Finch began to send his own covert team to Willow Creek. These weren't legitimate researchers, but a small, hand-picked group of loyal, morally flexible postdocs and graduate students, disguised as independent geological surveyors or amateur hikers. Their mission was insidious: to subtly infiltrate Aris's dig site, gather intel on her progress, and, if possible, subtly contaminate her data or tamper with her equipment to cast doubt on her findings. They would take discrete photographs, collect samples, and report back to Finch, allowing him to piece together Aris's discoveries. He wanted to be able to present his own groundbreaking findings, a distorted, plagiarized version of Aris's work, before she even had a chance to fully reveal hers. He planned to discredit her publicly, steal her glory, and seize absolute control of the Eldoria discovery. The echoes in the earth, once a mere scientific curiosity, were now becoming the battlefield for a ruthless academic war, with Elias Thorne, the old storyteller, holding the key to a truth that neither archaeologist truly understood yet. The hum of impending crisis, subtle at first, grew steadily into a cacophony that vibrated through Eris's very bones. The main archaeological dig site, nestled deep within the ancient, forgotten woods outside Willow Creek, was a place Elias had always referred to as the Whispering Glade. To the townspeople, it was merely an overgrown patch of wilderness, full of gnarled roots and shadowed hollows. But for Eris, and now, increasingly, for Elias, it was becoming the undeniable epicenter of a lost world. Here, amidst the methodical grids and careful excavations, the first tantalizing physical evidence of the lost kingdom of Eldoria was beginning to emerge. This once dismissed landscape, where Elias's fantastical tales had been woven, was rapidly transforming into the battleground for a high-stakes conflict between ancient knowledge and modern greed. Eris worked with a feverish intensity, her hands caked with earth, her mind racing. The discovery of the Crystal King's Eye had irrevocably altered her scientific worldview, but it had also ignited a desperate urgency. Her initial excavations, guided by Elias's uncanny, often cryptic directions, dig where the elder root entwines the silent stone, or seek the shadow that dances at noon's zenith, were yielding astonishing results. Fragments of impossibly smooth, obsidian-like stone, intricately carved with what could only be Elias's elder runes, were emerging from the earth. Subterranean probes were detecting anomalous chambers, perfectly symmetrical and impossibly deep, far beneath the forest floor. The sheer scale and complexity of the buried structures hinted at a civilization far more advanced than anything known to conventional history. The euphoria of discovery, however, was quickly overshadowed by the chilling realization of betrayal. Dr. Alistair Finch's subtle manipulations had been far more insidious than Eris had initially suspected. She noticed discrepancies in her data logs, minor calibration errors on her ground-penetrating radar, faint smudges on sensitive geological samples, almost imperceptible shifts in the positioning of survey markers. At first, she dismissed them as common field errors, the result of fatigue or faulty equipment, but the pattern became undeniable, too consistent to be accidental. A hidden camera she had discreetly set up, triggered by motion, finally provided irrefutable proof. Grainy night footage showed members of Finch's covert team, clad in dark clothing, moving stealthily through her meticulously organized dig site, tampering with her equipment, even contaminating some of her freshly unearthed samples with mundane soil. The sight of Finch's face, captured clearly as he directed his clandestine operations from a safe distance, filled Eris with a cold fury. He wasn't just attempting to discredit her, he was actively sabotaging a legitimate scientific endeavor, driven by a desperate, all-consuming ambition. The realization was a gut punch. She was isolated. Her academic colleagues, swayed by Finch's formidable reputation and insidious whispers, were largely skeptical of her findings, or, worse, actively working against her, believing Finch's narrative that she had succumbed to the influence of local eccentricities. Elias, her grandfather, was a fountain of invaluable, intuitive guidance, a living repository of Eldorian knowledge. But he couldn't actively participate in the scientific validation. He wasn't a peer-reviewed archaeologist. His methods, though astonishingly accurate, defied modern scientific protocol. Eris understood then, with a chilling clarity, that she must face this intellectual and professional challenge alone, relying solely on her own scientific rigor, her meticulous collection of empirical evidence, and her burgeoning, yet still unsettling, trust in Elias's fantastic tales, the weight of proving not just Eldoria's existence, but her own integrity, pressed down on her with crushing force. The pressure mounted exponentially when Finch, sensing that Eris was dangerously close to a major breakthrough, manufactured a crisis designed to utterly destroy her. He publicly announced a highly technical, high-stakes academic presentation at the prestigious Northeastern Archaeological Society's annual symposium, set for a week's time. At this symposium, he proclaimed, he would comprehensively debunk Dr. Thorne's unfounded and unscientific claims and present his alternative empirically sound theory regarding the unusual geological formations in the Appalachians. This alternative theory was, of course, nothing more than a distorted, plagiarized version of Aris's own findings, gleaned from his covert team's infiltration, spun to fit a conventional, non-Eldorian narrative. He also subtly leaked information to local media outlets, painting Aris as a reckless, unprofessional fringe scientist swayed by fairy tales, further eroding her credibility among the general public and within the academic community. This brazen act created an impossible time limit for Aris. A week. 1 week to gather enough irrefutable, unimpeachable evidence to not only prove the existence of Eldoria, but to prepare a comprehensive, undeniable scientific presentation that would validate Elias's stories and expose Finch's deceit. It was an overwhelming task, made more agonizing by the constant threat of sabotage from Finch's lingering team. Aris worked around the clock, fueled by strong coffee and an unyielding determination. She drove herself to exhaustion, meticulously categorizing artifacts, cross-referencing Elias's verses with her geological maps, and running endless analyses on the crystal shard, desperately searching for a smoking gun. A piece of evidence so undeniable it would silence even Finch. And then, as if the universe itself conspired against her, another formidable obstacle manifested. The skies over the Appalachian foothills, usually predictable in their moods, began to darken with an ominous, unnatural hue. A massive, unforeseen sandstorm, a rare and terrifying meteorological event in that region, began to brew. It was driven by unusual atmospheric currents and a freak alignment of high-pressure systems, gathering strength with terrifying speed. Warnings blared on the local radio. Seek shelter. Unprecedented sandstorm approaching Willow Creek. Visibility expected to drop to 0. The wind howled, whipping up fine grains of reddish-brown earth, churning the air into a suffocating, gritty vortex. The sandstorm wasn't just a weather event. It was a physical manifestation of the immense pressure Aris faced. It threatened to bury the entire dig site, along with Aris's burgeoning evidence, under a thick, impenetrable blanket of sand, erasing months of painstaking work in a matter of hours. The delicate instruments, the exposed artifacts, the very entrance to the chamber of the Crystal King's Eye, all were at risk of being lost forever. The roaring wind, laden with abrasive particles, threatened to damage her equipment, destroy her meticulously organized notes, and even injure her or Dr. Carter, who stubbornly remained by her side, despite the escalating danger. As the first tendrils of the storm, gritty and stinging, began to lash at the trees surrounding the dig site, Aris looked at Elias, who stood stoically beside her, his face weathered but calm, his eyes fixed on the approaching wall of dust. "Grandfather!" she shouted over the rising howl of the wind, her voice strained. "We have to secure the site. It's going to bury everything." Elias simply nodded, his gaze unwavering. The desert remembers, Aris, but the heart of Eldoria, it is buried deep. It will withstand this. We must go deeper. There is more to find. The true entrance. It lies where the ancient light touches the forgotten door. His words were as cryptic as ever. But now, Aris understood their urgency. The pressure was no longer just academic. It was a desperate race against the clock, against a ruthless rival, and against the unforgiving elements. The ultimate test had truly begun. She had to find the definitive proof, the absolute truth of Eldoria, before both Finch and the raging storm swallowed it whole. Her reputation, Elias's vindication, and the very history of a lost kingdom hung precariously in the balance. The sandstorm descended upon the whispering glade with the ferocity of an enraged titan. The sky, once merely bruised, turned a roiling, suffocating ochre, and the air thickened into a grinding, stinging abrasive. Visibility plummeted to near 0, the world outside Aris's and Ben's small, hastily erected tent collapsing into a chaotic maelstrom of whipping grit and howling wind. The canvas snapped and strained against its ropes, threatening to tear apart, and the constant high-pitched whine of sand scouring every surface was maddening. This was no ordinary weather event. It was a desperate, elemental race against time, a direct assault by nature itself, threatening to bury Elias's ancient kingdom before it could even be properly revealed. Inside the tent, illuminated by the flickering, defiant glow of a battery-powered lantern, Eris and Elias huddled, their faces smudged with dust, their clothes stiff with grit. Dr. Carter was outside, valiantly trying to secure the remaining equipment, his figure swallowed by the swirling chaos every few seconds. The precious Crystal King's eye, now a familiar weight in Eris's hand, pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to mirror her own frantic heartbeat. It was a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness, but its full purpose remained elusive. "Grandfather," Aris shouted over the relentless roar of the storm. "What do? We can't excavate in this. Everything will be lost." Elias, remarkably calm amidst the maelstrom, his gaze fixed on the flickering holographic map projected faintly from the crystal, replied, his voice raspy but clear. "The storm seeks to bury what is known. Aris, but the heart of Eldoria. It lies beyond the reach of the wind and sand. We must go deeper. The true entrance. It is hidden where the ancient light touches the forgotten door." His words, as ever, were a blend of cryptic verse and undeniable truth. He pointed a gnarled finger at a swirling point on the holographic projection, just beyond their current excavation site. There, where the Stone of Echoes sings to the whispering pool. The legends speak of it. It's not in a cavern. It's a passage, concealed by the very memory of the land. Eris frowned. A passage. But our ground-penetrating radar showed solid rock there, and a Stone of Echoes, and a whispering pool. Those are just fairy tale names. Grandfather. Elias shook his head. Not names. Eris. Descriptions. The Stone of Echoes is not a stone, but a place where sound resonates differently. The whispering pool is where underground water flows in a specific way. The ancient ones did not name things as you do. They described their essence. He then began to recite, a rhythmic chant that seemed to gain strength even as the wind outside intensified. "Where the triple root descends from the great oak's shadow, and the elder runes whisper beneath the mossy meadow. 3 steps down, where the water sighs unseen. The final truth lies, for those who are keen. Touch the crystal to the point where star moss blooms, and Eldoria's heart will banish all your glooms." Eris listened intently, her scientific mind grappling with the poetic instructions. Triple root, elder runes, mossy meadow, water sighing, star moss. These were not archaeological terms, yet they resonated with the geographical anomalies her instruments had picked up. It was a new language, a new method of navigation. "The map," she whispered, looking at the flickering projection from the crystal. "It's not a map of physical spaces. It's a map of energy and resonance." "Precisely," Elias said, a rare smile gracing his lips. The ancient ones understood the song of the earth. They had to reach that precise location, now buried under tons of shifting sand. Dr. Carter stumbled back into the tent, gasping for breath, his face a grimace. "The main excavation is almost entirely covered. We're losing it. Eris." "Not yet," Eris said, her voice firm, a newfound resolve burning in her eyes. "Grandfather. Ben. We need to go where Elias is pointing. The true entrance. The sand will cover our current dig, but if we can get to the real heart of Eldoria, we can save everything." Fighting against the brutal winds and blinding sand, they emerged from the tent. It was a desperate, almost suicidal race. Guided by Elias's uncanny sense of direction and Aris's scientific interpretation of his cryptic clues, they crawled through the swirling grit. The triple root was a massive ancient oak, its roots indeed forming a gnarled arch. Beneath it, a faint depression where Elias pointed out a peculiar formation of elder runes half buried in the moss. Eris frantically dug, her bare hands scraping against the gritty earth, the sand quickly filling her every breath. "Ben, seeing her determination, joined her, using a trowel as a makeshift spade. They found a narrow, vertical shaft, barely wide enough for them to descend. The sound of water, a faint, rhythmic sigh, indeed emanated from its depths. The whispering pool. As Eris descended, Elias whispering directions from above. She felt for the star moss, a patch of luminescent, silvery growth that glowed faintly, precisely as Elias had described it. It was exactly at the spot where the ancient light from the surface, even through the storm, seemed to touch. This was the held breath moment. The sandstorm raged, its roaring breath threatening to collapse the shaft around them. Eris was at the bottom, pressed against a cold, smooth stone wall, Elias's words echoing in her mind. She raised the Crystal King's eye, its inner glow now strong and vibrant, as if resonating with the very core of the earth. She pressed it against the specific point where the star moss bloomed, a faint geometric pattern emerging on the stone. For a moment, nothing happened. The wind howled, the sand shrieked, and despair threatened to overwhelm her. Had it all been for nothing? Had the magic, the ancient knowledge, finally failed? Then, with a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the very bedrock, the large section of the stone wall slowly, almost imperceptibly, slid inward. There was no grinding of gears, no sound of friction, just a silent, perfectly orchestrated movement. Beyond the newly revealed passage, an ethereal glow pulsed. Elias, looking down from above, his eyes shining with quiet vindication, knew. Eris, stepping through, felt as if she had walked into another dimension. The air inside was still, warm, and sweet, completely unaffected by the raging storm outside. Before them stretched a vast, perfectly preserved chamber, the true heart of Eldoria. It was breathtaking. Colossal crystal spires, imbued with a soft, internal luminescence, rose from the polished obsidian floor, reaching towards a vaulted ceiling that shimmered with what appeared to be constellations. Intricate carvings adorned every surface, symbols and narratives that mirrored Elias's fairy tales in astonishing detail. Advanced, delicate machinery of unknown purpose hummed with a low, vibrant energy. Shelves carved into the crystalline walls held rows upon rows of ancient texts, not on paper, but on thin, luminous tablets, etched with Elias's elder runes. This was not just an archaeological find, it was a perfectly preserved living testament to a lost civilization. The sunken city was real, and it was glorious. Eris quickly took high-resolution scans and detailed photographs, downloading data onto her encrypted drives, working with a frantic precision. This was irrefutable proof. The culmination of this discovery, and Elias's ultimate vindication, arrived days later at the Northeastern Archaeological Society's annual symposium. Dr. Alastair Finch, arrogant and self-assured, stood at the podium, a smug smirk on his face. He presented his fabricated evidence, meticulously compiled from the data stolen from Eris, twisted and recontextualized to fit his conventional theories. He ridiculed Eris's initial findings, dismissing them as anecdotal and unscientific, painting her as a naive academic swayed by local superstition. "As you can see," Finch declared, a triumphant gleam in his eye, "Dr. Thorne's so-called anomalies are nothing more than geological curiosities, perhaps influenced by unusual mineral deposits. Her claims of a lost kingdom are, frankly, the stuff of children's fairy tales." He even showed a doctored image of Elias, making him look disheveled and wild. Just as Finch was about to declare Eris's career null and void, a figure appeared at the back of the auditorium. It was Eris, disheveled but triumphant, her eyes burning with a fierce, quiet certainty. Beside her stood Elias, surprisingly calm, his presence an almost ethereal counterpoint to the sterile academic environment. She carried a tablet, connected to the auditorium's main display. "Dr. Finch, Eris's voice cut through the air, clear and resonant. "You are mistaken, and you are a fraud." A hush fell over the audience. Finch, visibly startled, glared at her. "Dr. Thorne, you're out of order. You're not on the program." "I am the program," Eris retorted, her gaze unwavering. She then projected her findings onto the massive screen. High-resolution scans and detailed photographs of the pristine, newly discovered chamber of Eldoria filled the screen. The colossal crystal spires, the intricate elder runes, the advanced technology. The audience gasped. She systematically dismantled Finch's lies, presenting irrefutable digital forensics that proved his team's sabotage, cross-referencing his stolen data with her own uncorrupted raw files. Then, she played a recording. It was the precise, low, resonant thrum of the Crystal King's eye, now clearly identifiable as the Thorn hum, perfectly matching the anomalous energy signatures she had detected weeks ago. The sound vibrated through the auditorium, a deep, ancient song. "This, ladies and gentlemen," Eris declared, her voice ringing with conviction, "is the heartbeat of Eldoria, a sound, a frequency that my grandfather, Mr. Elias Thorne," she gestured to him, and he took a small, dignified bow, "has known and told stories about for his entire life. He did not invent these tales. He preserved them. This is not folklore. This is history. This is the truth." The academic community, initially skeptical, then stunned into silence by the sheer magnitude of the discovery, erupted. A tumultuous wave of shock swept through the room, followed by profound awe, and then a deafening, rapturous applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Finch's face, initially smug, then shocked, turned to ashen gray, his carefully constructed lies crumbling around him like dust. He tried to speak, but no words would come. Elias, watching from the wings, his eyes shining with quiet vindication, saw his life's work, his fairy tales, his silly old man stories, finally recognized not just as truth, but as one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of their age. The legend had returned, and it had brought with it a truth that would rewrite history: the academic symposium. Once a stage for Dr. Alistair Finch's triumphant deceit, became the very crucible of his downfall. The collective gasps and then the thunderous applause that had greeted Eris Thorne's presentation resonated not just through the auditorium, but through the entire academic world. Finch's carefully constructed house of cards, built on stolen data and malicious slander, collapsed with devastating speed. Digital forensics, swiftly executed by ethical hackers within the Archaeological Society, unearthed irrefutable evidence of his team's infiltration and data contamination. Whistleblower accounts from his own frustrated, guilt-ridden team members, who could no longer stomach his blatant fraud, corroborated every detail. They provided emails, internal memos, and even audio recordings of Finch orchestrating the sabotage, his voice dripping with venom and avarice. His fall was swift and absolute. Within days, Dr. Alistair Finch was stripped of his professorship at the prestigious university he had so proudly represented. His extensive research grants, once the envy of his peers, were immediately revoked, leaving him professionally bankrupt. The countless articles he had published, now tainted by suspicion, were being re-evaluated, and many were retracted. The Archaeological Society initiated a formal investigation that promised ethical and, potentially, legal charges for academic fraud, professional misconduct, and even attempted sabotage of a legitimate scientific expedition. He faced the very real prospect of criminal charges for his actions. Finch, the man who had sought to bury truth for his own glory, found himself buried under the weight of his own hubris and deceit. He disappeared from the public eye, his name forever synonymous with disgrace, his ambition having utterly consumed him, leaving him with nothing but the bitter ashes of his shattered reputation. In the aftermath of the symposium, the academic community, particularly those who had so readily dismissed Eris or been swayed by Finch's insidious influence, rushed to make amends. Distinguished professors and venerable scholars, their faces etched with newfound humility, offered Eris effusive apologies. They extended invitations to collaborate on prestigious projects, offered keynote speaking opportunities at international conferences, and presented her with a cascade of new, generous funding offers for the Eldoria project. Eris, ever focused on the truth, accepted these overtures with quiet dignity, knowing that Eldoria deserved to be studied with the full weight of legitimate academic support. Back in Willow Creek, the transformation was even more profound, a heartwarming testament to the power of revealed truth. The children, who had once openly scoffed at Elias's silly old man tales, now flocked to him, their eyes wide with genuine awe and wonder. No longer were their questions tinged with mockery, but with breathless anticipation. "Tell us about the Crystal King. Mr. Thorne, is the light spire real? Did the people of Eldoria really fly?" They sat at his feet at the old oak by the creek, hanging on his every word, recognizing him not as an eccentric, but as the living, breathing link to a history more fantastic than any fairy tale. Their parents, deeply humbled by their past dismissal, approached Elias with newfound respect and profound gratitude. The lumber mill manager, Mr. Henderson, who had once openly laughed at Elias's petitions, now brought him fresh baked pies. Mrs. Gable, the sharp-tongued store owner, offered him free groceries. The town council, deeply embarrassed by their previous disdain, held a special public session. Mayor Hemlock, his face flushed with genuine remorse, issued a heartfelt public apology to Elias, acknowledging their grave error in judgment. They then voted unanimously to officially protect the newly discovered Eldoria site as a national historical treasure, immediately establishing a protective perimeter and halting any further development in the area. More significantly, they honored Elias Thorne as the town's guardian of lore, a formal recognition of his invaluable role in preserving their forgotten history. For Eris, the vindication was not just personal, but professional. She was now offered the lead role in a massive, internationally funded archaeological project, specifically designed to fully excavate, study, and preserve the lost kingdom of Eldoria. It was the kind of opportunity archaeologists dreamed of, a chance to rewrite textbooks and redefine human history. Yet Eris, forever changed by her experience, understood that her scientific expertise alone was insufficient. During the press conference announcing the project, with cameras flashing and microphones thrust towards her, she made an unexpected declaration. "I accept this immense responsibility," Eris stated, her voice clear and resonant, "but only on one condition: that this project is co-led by the true visionary behind this discovery, my grandfather, Mr. Elias Thorne." She turned to Elias, who stood quietly beside her, his eyes twinkling with a mix of surprise and pride. His knowledge, his understanding of Eldoria, transcends conventional archaeology. He is the living link, the keeper of this ancient wisdom. Without him, we would merely be excavating stones. With him, we can truly understand a civilization. Elias, in turn, accepted the co-leadership role, not for the fame or the prestige, which held no allure for him, but to ensure that Eldoria's story was told truthfully, respectfully, and with the reverence it deserved. It was an opportunity that blended scientific rigor with ancient wisdom, bridging the seemingly unbridgeable gap between two worlds, forging a new path for archaeological discovery. Weeks later, a profound sense of peace had settled over the main chamber of Eldoria. The dust had been cleared, and temporary, non-invasive lighting illuminated the breathtaking crystal structures, causing them to glow softly, casting an otherworldly radiance across the polished floors and intricately carved walls. Eris and Elias sat together on a perfectly preserved stone bench, the Crystal King's eye resting between them on a velvet cloth, its gentle hum filling the sacred space. "Grandfather," Eris began, her voice soft with humility, "I was so wrong. I spent my entire life believing only in what I could see, measure, and prove. I thought I knew everything. But your stories, they held more truth, more profound knowledge than all my textbooks combined. She ran a hand over the cool, smooth surface of a nearby crystal spire. This place, it's beyond anything I imagined. A civilization that lived in harmony with the very pulse of the earth. How could we have forgotten such a thing? Elias smiled, his gaze distant, as if seeing across millennia. Truth, Aris, is often woven into the fabric of stories, waiting for those with open hearts to hear it. Science gives us the how the crystals harness energy, how the structures were built, how the elder runes function. But stories, my dear, they give us the why. They tell us of the purpose, the spirit, the very soul of a people. They remind us of our connection to the land, to the past, to each other. He picked up the Crystal King's eye, holding it aloft. This is not just a scientific marvel. Aris, it is a symbol of Eldoria's wisdom. A wisdom that taught them to listen to the whispers of the earth, not just exploit its resources. They fell into a comfortable silence, reflecting on the profound implications of Eldoria's existence. It represented a unique harmony between advanced technology and deep respect for nature, a sustainable civilization that had mastered energies unknown to the modern world. Their shared responsibility now was not just to excavate, but to interpret, to teach, and to protect this incredible legacy, ensuring its lessons echoed far beyond the walls of this magnificent, rediscovered kingdom. The new calm was not merely the absence of conflict, it was the quiet, profound peace of a shared purpose, a family reconciled, and a lost truth finally brought to light. 5 years later, the small, once unremarkable town of Willow Creek had undergone a metamorphosis. No longer was it a place where tradition was dismissed and progress defined solely by the hum of machinery. It had become a thriving hub of historical and scientific tourism, known globally as the gateway to the lost kingdom of Eldoria. The old lumber mill still operated, but its presence was now balanced by the hushed reverence of visitors exploring ancient wonders. The town had embraced its past, integrating its new identity with a deep respect for the history it had almost forgotten. Hotels, eco-friendly and built with local materials, blended seamlessly with the natural landscape. Small businesses, from artisan craft shops selling Eldorian-inspired jewelry to quaint cafes serving Crystal King's brew, flourished, creating a vibrant, sustainable economy that honored both the old and the new. Elias Thorne, once the town's eccentric storyteller, was now its most revered elder. His cabin, once a place of quiet solitude, had become a beloved landmark, a beacon for curious minds. He continued to share his stories, but now with a profound new legitimacy. Children and adults alike would gather at the base of the old oak by the creek, no longer laughing at his tales, but hanging on his every word. His voice, still raspy with age, carried the weight of millennia, weaving narratives of Eldoria that were now understood as real history, not mere fantasy. He was the living link, the cherished bridge connecting the modern world to Eldoria's extraordinary past, his eyes twinkling with the quiet satisfaction of a life's truth finally recognized. Aris Thorne, a world-renowned archaeologist, now held a position of unparalleled respect in her field. She continued to lead the Eldoria project, ensuring its ethical excavation and meticulous preservation. The kingdom's advanced crystal technology, once a matter of fantastical legend, was being carefully studied by leading scientists from around the globe. Its unique properties offered groundbreaking insights into sustainable energy, harmonious living, and a symbiotic relationship with nature that challenged conventional understanding. The town itself had developed a beautiful, organic relationship with the archaeological site, drawing prosperity from the steady stream of visitors, while maintaining a deep, almost spiritual reverence for the land and its ancient secrets. Aris's early skepticism had transformed into a profound humility and an unwavering dedication to understanding and preserving Eldoria's legacy for all humanity. driven by a deep sense of responsibility and a desire to ensure that Eldoria's wisdom resonated far beyond the confines of Willow Creek. Elias established the Eldoria Storytelling and Oral History Institute, housed in a beautifully restored old schoolhouse. The institute was dedicated to preserving and promoting oral traditions and forgotten histories from around the world. Elias, with his newfound prominence, personally mentored young storytellers, teaching them not just the art of narrative and the power of language, but the crucial importance of listening, truly listening, to the whispers of the past, to the unspoken truths embedded in ancient lore and forgotten landscapes. He instilled in them a reverence for wisdom passed down through generations, urging them to seek knowledge beyond textbooks and empirical data. Eris, equally committed to paying it forward, initiated the Thorne Legacy Grant for Interdisciplinary Studies. This prestigious grant encouraged young scholars to bridge the gap between traditional knowledge and modern science, funding groundbreaking projects that explored ancient wisdom through a rigorous scientific lens. Students received funding to research traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous astronomical observations, and the historical use of natural resources, often in collaboration with local communities and elders. It was a tangible way to honor Elias's contributions and to foster a new generation of researchers who understood that true discovery often lay at the intersection of seemingly disparate fields. Together, Elias and Aris ensured that Eldoria's profound knowledge, particularly its insights into environmental harmony and sustainable living, was shared widely for the betterment of humanity. The story of Elias and Aris, of Willow Creek and Eldoria, culminates in a powerful, emblematic image. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Elias and Aris stood together at a newly constructed, eco-friendly visitor center, its design thoughtfully blending into the surrounding forest, overlooking the magnificent excavated parts of Eldoria. Below them, through the transparent, self-cleaning glass of the viewing platform, lay the breathtaking revealed chambers of the Lost Kingdom. In the center of the visitor center, a single, perfectly faceted crystal, once a part of the legendary Crystal King's Eye, and now safely displayed within a secure, custom-built exhibit, emitted a soft, constant glow. Its internal light, gentle and serene, illuminated not just the immediate display, but seemed to cast an ethereal radiance over the ancient ruins visible beyond the glass. It was a tangible connection, a pulsing heart that linked the modern world to the wisdom of Eldoria. Around Elias, a circle of children sat on soft cushions, their eyes wide with wonder, their faces reflecting the gentle glow of the crystal. Elias, his voice a low, melodious hum, recounted the tale of Eldoria's first king, who spoke to the crystals and learned to live in harmony with the earth. The children, no longer giggling or mocking, were utterly captivated, their young minds absorbing the very real magic and profound wisdom of a world once dismissed as mere fantasy. Eris watched them, a profound sense of fulfillment settling over her. The light from Eldoria, once dismissed as a fairy tale by a skeptical world, now shone brightly, a beacon of truth, wisdom, and the enduring power of stories to preserve, to reveal, and to inspire. It was a light that would guide not just archaeologists, but generations to come, reminding them that the greatest treasures are often found where logic meets imagination, and where the past finally reveals its future. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that the oldest tales often hold the deepest truths and that even the most forgotten voices can reveal incredible wonders, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.